manage is going to make a world of difference. Do you agree with me?
Even if I'm a radiologist. Yeah.
Even a radiologist can appreciate an effective problem list. So this is one of your most effective tools, but as much as we need to think about ourselves, we've got to think of the team, all right? You have to in some way think, what are the things on the problem list, all right, that are going to be very effective both for us and for the team? And the problem list, I joke, it's like Manhattan. It's like the most precious real estate. And just like Manhattan's an island, the problem list is an island, all right? You could put 50 things, you can put like huge long notes, but there's not enough room. If you put too much things, in there, it's not going to be effective. So I want you to think of this concept that in this decade, we live in a Twitter world. How many of you use Twitter? Do any of you tweet? All right, so most of us don't tweet. But you and I live in a Twitter world even if you don't tweet. And why is that? Because we are in a world basically where the amount of time, the amount of information, between 2000 and 2010, it was the information age. We had all this information. We can look up stuff on the internet. From 2010 to 2020, we don't have the time. You and I only have time to basically read 10 to 15 words, and we move on to the next thought. So how does the Twitter age affect problem lists? Well, what you want to do is to do everything you can to make sure that what you have on the problem list, all right, is important and needs to be there. And don't put anything that's superfluous. And you want to be able to create an overview note, all right, that basically is a tweet. 140 characters, 150 characters maximum, all right? So yeah, let's say someone has coronary artery disease, all right? In 150 characters, what is something that I absolutely need to know that can fit in 150 characters? Do I need all 3 cath reports? Do I need just the most recent? Do I need a cath report if it's normal, to say, all 3 are normal or just everything's normal? You and I have to make clinical judgments, but the fact remains is that you need to have a Twitter mindset, all right? 150 characters or less. If it's 150 characters or less, and even if there are 12 problems, you can scan through 12 tweets in less than a minute. Everyone else in this world does, and you and I can do that as well. But if you don't have those tweets, all right, then you're going to be bogged down, and then what you're going to do is you're going to spend 20 minutes in chart review trying to find the same information. And I just want to point out that I noticed that Andy, as he was in the demonstration, one of the things that he did when he was looking at the past medical history, even though he didn't jump to orders or the progress note documentation, he went straight to the problem list and he tried to document a couple of things in the problem list. And you might think, yeah, at 10 o'clock at night, that takes a bit of time. But that 30 or 60 seconds of investment might save time for several of you in this room. If that patient has to come in for other problems, what he did was a service to himself and a service to all of you. So even if you don't think that this is something that's going to help you that much, this is one of the times where you really need to think of your team. So again, in summary, cross-cover efficiently with search filters. You want to be able to send future messages to your staff and to your patients. Don't remind yourself to do something if it involves someone else. Just send it in the future to someone else. It saves you that time. And it's also courtesy to your patients and to your staff. Do you realize this? I mean, if I sent you a message and said, hey, John, do something for me next week. Well, what's he going to do? He's going to need to write it down. He's going to need to do some sort of reminder. If I know that he's here next week, why not make it so that someone, or in this case, the computer, personally delivers what he needs to do at that moment, all right? Less clutter for the in-basket for him. He'll only see it on the day that he needs it. It's a service to your staff and to your patients. And I'll tell you this, we learned about this yesterday regarding MD-MA optimization. If we show that type of consideration in terms of helping our support staff, then as these things change and we need to be more efficient, we'll be able to rally them on towards this change. Yeah, one question.
So when you send this to John, does it go CC chart, CC encounter, CC message? Where does it go in the inbox?
That's an excellent question. It probably depends on which things you use, because some of you might forward actually charts with comments. Some of you might send a particular staff message. So it might go into different folders depending on how you send those messages. And again, when we cover the staff messaging and the different ways that you can send the messages, we'll also point out to which individual folders that drops down to. All right?
Any other questions or thoughts?
Pedro and Irene, is the problem list still being populated by a prob list? You know, that it puts certain diagnosis on its own because I clean it up and then suddenly basal cell appears in it because I've already treated it. Is that still happening?
We have a handful of, so I think everyone heard the question. I mean, is there certain algorithms that will pre-populate, you know, things in the problem list? We only have a very small handful. We probably have to look into details in terms of your specific situation. So we have just a handful of things that auto-populate, like new member, returning member, and a couple of other things, but that should be the exception, not the rule. So basically the problem list primarily is populated at a physician level, and only on rare occasions is it by a non-physician or by the computer. So if you see stuff that probably shouldn't be there, I'd say 90% of the time it's someone else in this room, you know, that populates.
Pedro, from the internal medicine standpoint, are we ever going to get to the point where the inpatient problems don't get on the problem list for us to clean up?
That's a really good. It actually is a workflow issue. It's not so much a technology issue. So what happens is in the inpatient visit, as they see patients to drop the charges correctly, the problems need to stay there. But as a workflow issue, and this is where you could team up with your HBS colleagues prior to closing off the hospital visit as a discharge summary, they can resolve those issues. So it is workflow.
Yeah, one final question in the back. Thanks, Rob.
So I'm from HBS, inpatient. Basically, when we have a patient, say, diabetes with hypoglycemia, and when the hypoglycemia resolves, we click resolve on that. And that's how, when we discharge the patient, the diagnoses will be shown as resolved problems, and that should not populate on any dot drop list.
Nice thought. No. Yeah. That doesn't happen. So what happens is all this temporary diagnosis,